Welcome back to the channel. Today I've got a little 90 GT here that belongs to a customer. The car isn't running very well. The customer brought it to me for a triage. We had a quick look at the car and it looks like it really just needs a little bit of attention, but it has several of the most common problems that Foxbodies have. So I thought I'd bring you guys in on this job, show you some of these problems and what we're going to do about them. Okay, the first thing is it has 24-pound injectors. Now, at first glance, it looked like it had a stock mass air meter, and this is a common problem. Guys put 24-pound injectors in the cars, they don't upgrade the mass air meter or program the car, and as a consequence, it runs too rich. That's something the customer reports. He thinks the car runs too rich. We're going to find out, I guess. At first glance, it looks like a stock mass air meter, but I'm not so sure that it isn't a C&L 76. The way the C&L meters worked was they installed a different sample tube depending on what injectors were installed on the car. The sample tubes are identifiable by a paint mark on them, if the paint mark is even still visible. And the idea is that they varied the sample tube diameter depending on the injectors in order to try and get a representative sample. In practice, these meters worked reasonably well, let's say the 24-pound level, but the bigger the injectors are, the more variance they had, and really they needed to have custom programming just for that car in order to work reliably. The other way meters were calibrated in this era was by calibrating the electronics. That was a more reliable and repeatable way to get a calibration for a mass air meter. I don't know for sure. We're going to have to open that up and see if it's a 24-pound calibrated C&L, because it might be. If it isn't, if it's got a 19-pound calibration, or if it is in fact a stock MAF, then obviously it's never going to work right. And this is mistake number one. Guys put bigger injectors in one of these cars, they don't change the mass air meter or program it, and as a consequence the car runs way too rich, like 25% too rich. They think it's going to compensate, but it doesn't, and especially at wide open throttle, it's going to stop using the signal from the oxygen sensors to make adjustments, and it's going to be way too rich at wide open throttle. The next problem I saw in the car was the alternator wiring. It's got a 3G alternator conversion, which is great, but it's using the factory wiring harness. Now, the factory wiring harness looks like it's two 10-gauge wires, but it isn't. It's really just one. It's two 10-gauge wires for a few inches, and then it goes to one. That is not a heavy enough wire for a 130 amp alternator. It's not going to catch on fire, but it is going to create electrical problems, and you are not going to get the benefit of the 130 amp alternator if you use that kind of wiring. I have another video on this channel that explains the whole process of doing a 3G conversion on one of these cars, including the wiring. I implore you to look at that video if you're going to do this, and if you're going to wire it. And please don't buy one of these ready-made wiring conversion kits from somebody, because all of them just add a run of 8-gauge. That's not enough either, and it's a crummy way to do it. Do it like I do, with a 150 amp breaker and 2-gauge wire from the alternator to the starter solenoid. Another thing that I noticed on this car, which is pretty unfortunate, is the rear torque boxes are kind of a mess. They have some tearing damage, which is common, of course, but the worst problem is they have a ton of jacking damage. The torque boxes are incorporated into the frame rail at the back there, and you can jack on them where the frame rail makes up a part of that torque box assembly. But you should not jack on them on the flat part of the torque box, which is outside the frame rail. If you do, you get the kind of jacking damage which is on here, where they're pressed up. It can be a real bear to fix that problem. In a lot of cases, if I see a car like that and guys ask me, should I buy this car, I say move on to the next one, because it's so hard to fix. This car isn't a bad car. Customer already owns it. He paid a reasonable price for it as far as I remember, and I guess he's left with the problem of trying to solve that torque box issue in the back. Not impossible, it's just a bigger problem than you would really like. On top of everything else, the car can benefit from a dyno tune. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Follow along with me while we work through these problems, and we'll see if we can't get a nice running car out of it. Here's a quick look at how this car runs before we do any changes. I finished all the sort of pre-work repairs on this car that we had identified. Replaced the alternator wiring harness with a brand new harness. It's all 2 gauge except for about a foot of wire from the alternator to 150 amp breaker on the passenger side frame rail, which is 4 gauge. And the reason you use 4 gauge there is because it fits on the alternator a lot easier, and just a foot of 4 gauge is not going to hurt much of anything. Like I said, there's a video on here that shows how to do the whole 3G upgrade, including the wiring. Always follow my directions for the wiring. Don't buy a wiring kit. I'll put a card up here on the screen in case you're watching on a platform that supports cards, and I'll link that video in the description. The other thing that I've done here is I had to take the cold air apart to get at this wiring harness and breaker install anyway. And I have identified the mass air meter. It is a C&L 76. Maybe I should have cottoned on to this because the aluminum tube from the throttle body says C&L right on it. But anyway, that's what it is. It's a C&L 76. It's a yellow tube. I didn't actually look the tube up, but I'm guessing that that is the right tube for 24-pound injectors. Want to find out when I plug in here with my computer tomorrow to program the car, whether it's close or way out. And if it looks way out, maybe I'll bother to look that tube up, but it's probably the right tube for 24-pound injectors. However, something I did here, which you should do as well, is I've disconnected that mass air meter from the shock tower. It was attached with that shock tower brace. That gives it no range of motion, and it can tend to work the couplers loose when it does that. And on top of that, this car uses a fender well mounted cold air kit with a 90-degree elbow in front of it. When you have a 90-degree elbow in front of your mass air meter for a cold air like this, your best bet is to rotate that mass air meter 45 degrees clockwise as you're looking at the car from the front. So that's 45 degrees inboard. That's going to give you the best possible sample. Now, it won't always be right on, and like I said with the C&L, it can be off anyway, but that's going to give you the best possible sample, and that's what I did. So that should improve things a little bit as well. Another thing that I noticed is this EGR valve is all loose and flopping around. I thought maybe it's leaking or something like that. So I took this off and put a block off on. Now, when I took it off, I realized there was a kind of a homemade gasket in behind there that was meant to block the EGR anyway. So somehow I don't think it was leaking, but that's just a piece of junk. It's not doing anything. It's broken, and taking that off simplifies things and actually makes it a little bit lighter as well. I don't know what this thing weighs, but like a pound, something like that. If you're worried about the weight of your car, probably not on a street car. After I've done these repairs, I started the car, and if you remember, it idled rough. It surged, it was up and down, it didn't run good. The car didn't run good driving it in and out of the shop either, and it's been here a couple days, so I've had to drive it in and out a little bit. After these changes, the car runs way better. Part of that is from getting this mass air meter oriented properly, but you should never underestimate how important it is to have good wiring in your electrical system, especially the main harness from the alternator to your starter solenoid. That stuff has to be right. It has to be good, and it has to match the alternator that you have in the car, or you can get all kinds of funny little gremlins that can be very hard to put your finger on. So just these couple of things, tilting the mass air meter, blocking off the EGR, although it was probably already blocked, and the alternator wiring has made the car run way better. That's without even looking at the PCM. Tomorrow we're going to crack open the PCM, we're going to get it on the dyno, we're going to do a chip tune, we're going to see if we can't get this car to really run right, get it set up perfectly. But these changes have already made a serious difference. The basic setup procedure is mostly outlined in the video Foxbody Idle Control Demystified, which I'll link above. In this case, I set the timing to 10 degrees before top dead center with the spout removed, and I installed a working fuel pressure gauge on the Schrader valve and set the adjustable fuel pressure regulator to achieve 43 psi with the vacuum line removed from the regulator. This car had been set at over 60 psi due to a bad electric gauge. Finally, I adjusted the TPS setting to about 0.94 volts. The TPS sensor in this car had only one screw and was installed with the plastic tangs on the wrong side of the throttle tab, so I fixed that as well. All right, I just finished up the dyno tune on this little Mustang. It made, I think, 232 at the wheels on here. A stalker on here makes around 170, 172, something like that. So it's, anyway you slice it, it's about 35% over stock. That's pretty good. It's hard to be sure what all to attribute that to. I mean, it's got headers and off-road exhaust and a RPM2 manifold, which is a good manifold, and a 70mm throttle, and a 76mm mass air. It could have a cam. It could have a little bit of head work. It does have like iron heads on it, so it's probably not too dramatic in the heads department. But who knows? It's a nice little runner. Feels good, drives good, starts good, idles good, comes down from a dyno pole, no problem. There's no up and down or trying to stall or any of that. So I think we're done. I think we've got a pretty good success here. That's really what it takes to sort out one of these little cars. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll throw some videos up around my head here that YouTube thinks you might like. Like the channel, subscribe, ring the notification bell. One of the best things you can do to help me out is leave a comment. Tell me what you think about the car, what you think about the process. We'll see you next time.